The end of beginning, as special elections tilt blue and Mike Johnson frets aloud, MAGA confronts a familiar midterm arithmetic, and an unfamiliar anxiety. In Washington, panic is rarely announced, it seeps. It appears first as a statistical footnote in a low-turnout special election in North Texas. It surfaces next in a private admission to a reporter that the other side is fired up. And eventually, it bursts forth on cable television, when a Speaker of the House warns that losing the midterms would be, in effect, the end of the presidency. Thus, it was that Mike Johnson, ordinarily a man of procedural piety and biblical cadence, delivered a line that ricocheted around Republican circles, should the party lose its House majority in 2026. It would amount to the end of Donald Trump's presidency in a real effect. Presidents require 4 years to fix messes, he said. 2 will not do. In other words, the midterms, still months away, have begun to feel existential. For a movement that made a brand of winning, the early returns of 2026 have been awkward. In 20 state-level special elections this year, Democrats have averaged 11 points ahead of Kamala Harris's 2024 performance in the same constituencies. In North Texas, Taylor Remet flipped a state Senate seat Mr. Trump had carried by 17 points. In another district, Chastity Verrett Martinez notched a 24-point victory where the president had won by 13. Even in Oklahoma, where Republicans won a state House race by 28 points, the margin was down from Mr. Trump's 58-point romp 2 years earlier. Republicans insist these are curiosities. Mason D. Palma of the Republican State Leadership Committee calls them unique, low-turnout contests driven by highly localized factors. This is true, as far as it goes. Special elections are notoriously strange beasts, dominated by activists, distorted by quirks of timing, inflated by enthusiasm gaps. But patterns have a habit of hardening into trends, and trends, in American midterms, are merciless. The iron law of midterms. American politics has a simple axiom: the president's party always loses seats in its first midterm. Since the Second World War, only 2 presidents, Bill Clinton in 1998 and George W. Bush in 2002, have bucked the rule, and both did so under exceptional circumstances. The iron law exists because midterms are less about affirmation than correction. They are the electorate's opportunity to rebalance. In 2026 the rebalancing instinct may be particularly acute. Mr. Trump returned to office in 2025 promising order on immigration, prosperity in trade and a muscular reassertion of American sovereignty. His base remains fervent. Yet the polls show erosion where it matters most. Among independents and suburban moderates, at the beginning of his term, Mr. Trump's net approval on immigration stood at 11. It has since slipped to -11. On the economy the reversal is sharper still, from 12 to -23. Several surveys suggest that a plurality of Americans now believe Joe Biden managed the economy better than Mr. Trump is doing now, an irony that would have seemed implausible in the inflationary aftermath of the pandemic. The causes are manifold. A volatile trade regime has unsettled markets. Enforcement-first immigration policies have galvanized opposition as well as support. 2 Americans were killed during anti-immigration rallies in Minnesota, casting a pall over the administration's law and order narrative. None of these events alone determines a midterm. Together, they create a mood. Politics is not physics, it is weather. And the barometer is falling. The enthusiasm gap. The most telling admission came from a Republican quoted anonymously: "Democrats are fired up," he said, "and the GOP base is sleepy." A 10-point Democratic overperformance relative to Mr. Trump's 2024 numbers is emerging across special elections. Enthusiasm gaps are decisive in low-turnout contests. They are also contagious. A string of Democratic overperformances, however parochial, encourages donors, mobilizes volunteers, and stiffens candidate spines. It also speaks the other side. The phrase "fired up Democratic base" carries historical resonance. In 2018, opposition to Mr. Trump produced a 40-seat Democratic pickup in the House. In 2022, Republicans hope to replicate that energy against Mr. Biden. Instead, the much-predicted red wave fizzled. The lesson of that cycle was that abortion and threats to democratic norms could animate Democratic voters beyond expectations. In 2026, Democrats sensed an opening. They point to shrinking Republican margins in ruby-red districts as evidence of softening enthusiasm. They circulate Mr. Johnson's end of the presidency clip with relish. If the speaker believes defeat would neuter the president, they argue, voters may conclude that it should. Republicans counter that special elections exaggerate discontent. They note that turnout is erratic and that nationalizing hyperlocal races is a fool's errand. They are correct. But midterms are, by definition, a national plebiscite masquerading as 1,000 local ones, the Senate mirage. A year ago, one Republican strategist told Axios, a Senate majority seemed almost guaranteed. Now it looks far less certain. That shift in tone matters. The Senate map in 2026 is less forgiving to Republicans than it once appeared. A handful of competitive seats, once presumed safe, now appear vulnerable if Democratic overperformance persists. Senate races differ from House contests in scale and cost. They are candidate-centric and expensive. But they, too, are hostage to the national mood. If Mr. Trump's approval on the economy remains underwater, even disciplined Republican incumbents may struggle to insulate themselves. For Mr. Trump, the Senate is not merely a legislative chamber, it is a judicial factory. His first term reshaped the federal bench, culminating in a conservative Supreme Court majority. A Democratic Senate would halt further confirmations and potentially launch investigations. A Democratic House would do the same, with added zeal, hence Mr. Johnson's candor. The real effect of losing the House would not be constitutional termination, it would be paralysis. Governing as campaigning, Mr. Trump has never drawn a sharp line between governing and campaigning. His second term has followed the pattern of the first, rallies blur into policy announcements. Grievances morph into executive orders. At his recent State of the Union address he boasted of achievements with the confidence of a candidate still in motion, yet governing as campaigning has limits. Midterm electorates are older and whiter than presidential ones, but they are also more independent. They may applaud the president's rhetoric yet recoil from instability. The economic numbers complicate the picture. Inflation has cooled, but growth is uneven. Tariff escalations, pitched as patriotic correction, have rattled certain industries. Voters who tolerated disruption in pursuit of long-term gain may grow impatient. Mr. Trump's genius has been turning polarization into propulsion. The question for 2026 is whether fatigue will dampen it. The Save America gambit, among the online responses to Mr. Johnson's remarks was a familiar refrain: pass the Save America Act or Republicans will lose to Democrat cheating with illegals. Election integrity has become both shield and sword within MAGA politics. It energizes the base and frames potential defeat as procedural rather than popular, but it carries risks. Independent voters, weary of conspiratorial overtones, may interpret such rhetoric as preemptive excuse-making. Moreover, raising doubts about election legitimacy before ballots are cast can depress one's own turnout. Democrats, for their part, are happy to foreground Mr. Johnson's warning. Run this clip over and over, one social media user suggested. They intend to, structural gravity, beyond mood and messaging lies structure. The House majority is narrow. A swing of a dozen seats could flip control. Redistricting has produced a map with fewer true battlegrounds but greater volatility in the ones that remain. Suburban districts that oscillated between parties in recent cycles will again determine control. Historically, a president with approval ratings below 45% at the midterm suffers heavy losses. Mr. Trump's current numbers hover around that threshold, sometimes below. Should economic pessimism deepen, gravity will assert itself. Republicans retain advantages. The party's base is geographically efficient, concentrated in districts that maximize representation. Democratic votes are clustered in urban centers, often wasted in lopsided victories. Yet even efficient maps cannot fully insulate against national swings. The midterms are not a referendum on ideology alone, they are a verdict on competence. Panic and denial. Within Republican ranks, two instincts compete: minimization and mobilization. The first dismisses special elections as anomalies. The second treats them as early warning sirens. Panic, when contained, can be productive. It spurs fundraising, sharpens messaging, and disciplines candidates. Panic, when public, can be corrosive. Mr. Johnson's comment straddled the line. Intended as motivation, it sounded like an alarm. Democrats, conversely, must guard against overconfidence. Special elections flatter enthusiasm, they do not guarantee breadth. A 10-point overperformance in a low-turnout race may evaporate in a general election flooded with casual voters. The electorate is not static. Events, economic shocks, foreign crises, legislative victories, can reorder priorities swiftly. The president's shadow, 2026, will hinge less on Taylor Remet or Chastity Verrett Martinez than on Mr. Trump himself. Midterms are referenda on the incumbent's presence. If voters feel steadier than they did in 2024, Republicans may weather losses without catastrophe. If they feel anxious or aggrieved, correction will follow. Mr. Trump has survived predictions of political demise before. His appeal is rooted in grievance and defiance. Setbacks can reinforce the narrative of embattlement. A Democratic House could provide a foil, enabling him to campaign against obstruction, but legislative impotence would also blunt his capacity to deliver. No new tax cuts. No sweeping immigration overhaul. Investigations instead of initiatives. The end of the presidency was hyperbole. Yet hyperbole often contains a shard of truth. A presidency constrained by hostile chambers is diminished. The arithmetic of fear. Why, then, the visible anxiety? Because numbers, however small, whisper. An 11-point Democratic overperformance here, a 30-point margin shrinking to 28 there. Each alone is trivial. Together they sketch a slope. Republicans recall 2018. They recall if a strong economy would override discontent. They recall waking to a blue house. Democrats recall 2022, when their feared drubbing failed to materialize. Both parties understand that midterms punish complacency. MAGA's brand is confidence, inevitability. Panic punctures that aura. The sight of senior Republicans conceding vulnerability emboldens opponents. The road to November. Between now and November 2026 lie variables beyond prediction. Economic indicators may brighten. Immigration crossings may fall. A foreign policy triumph, or debacle, could dominate headlines. Voters have short memories and elastic loyalties. For Democrats, the challenge is to convert enthusiasm into coalition. Fired-up activists are necessary but insufficient. Persuadable moderates decide margins. For Republicans, the task is to reawaken a base that turned out in 2024 but appears less animated in off-year contests. Mr. Johnson is correct in one respect: 2 years are rarely enough to entrench an agenda. But midterms are rarely kind to ambition. They are instruments of restraint, a presidency in suspension. Should Republicans retain both chambers, Mr. Trump's second term will proceed with legislative velocity. Should they lose one, it will enter a phase of negotiation and obstruction. Should they lose both, it will become a defensive crouch. American constitutional design anticipates such oscillation. The founders engineered friction. What partisans feel like catastrophe is often equilibrium. MAGA's incipient panic is therefore both rational and premature. Rational because the numbers hint at erosion. Premature because midterms are shaped by forces not yet formed. Politics abhors certainty. The only guarantee is volatility. As winter turns to spring and spring to summer, the data will accumulate. Each special election will be parsed for omens. Each poll will be dissected from drift. The speaker's warning will echo in fundraising emails and attack ads. Whether it proves prophecy or footnote will depend on a calculus older than Mr. Trump and likely to outlast him, the electorate's instinct to balance power. For now, the lesson of 2026's early skirmishes is not that the presidency is ending. It is that gravity exists. Even for those who believe they have mastered it.